Well, listen, John Martin, I'm going to let you start this episode because this is all about you.
It's not really all about me. It's about us. It's about us as a group, not just you and me, but all of us friends from high school,
That's
which is
true.
which we were going to record last week. Everybody, by the way, I am Jonathan Martin, one of the hosts of Game Life Balance, a podcast about video games and balancing life, and then kind of other games too today. So other stuff. This is Cody Goff, my co-host. We are doing a podcast today actually about board games.
Yeah,
so
we're going to break from our format. We've been doing reviewing SNES classic games one by one, and we lied last episode when we said we would do one this week.
Yeah, and if you have followed us at all, we've actually done board game episodes in the past because we kind of all have an interest in them adjacent to our love of video games. I personally enjoy them more, but the barrier to entry of getting everybody together to play them is so much higher than playing a video game that it's just not conducive to getting together on a regular basis to play them, right? Not like a video game, which I can just call you up and say, hey, let's kill a couple zombies in this game because killing zombies is fun sometimes, right? That's a lot easier to do than getting 4 to 8 people to sit around a table and play board games together.
Right, and naked, which is our preferred way of playing.
It was very warm. The weekend was very warm. So every year on Memorial Day weekend, we've talked about it before, actually, we have something called MartinCon. Martin is my last name.
Wait,
you may have noticed that. I know.
Oh my God. I've been wondering why we...
The secret behind the naming convention of the convention. That is why we call it that. So we hold MartinCon every year over Memorial Day. I think this is the 3rd or 4th year that we've done it. Anybody that wants to can come stay at my place for 4 days, and we play a lot of board games, oftentimes some video games, but it is an excuse to get together and drink and just play a lot of board games and then eat my wife's cooking, and it's pretty awesome.
It is.
And eat a lot of food. My wife even commented this time that she's like, your friends can eat a lot of food. And I said, yes, they can, because you all ate us out of house and home. So I just kind of want to talk about some of the board games that we played, because I kind of feel like this was one of the most successful MartinCons we've had so far. I think it might have been. We played so many board games, which from its inception was kind of the purpose of it. So, and it was kind of from start to finish. That was all we kind of did, which was, and we got, I feel like the other reason why it was successful was that we got a really good mix of the types of board games we played. There were some, really long 4 to 6 hour games that some of us got to play. And then there were a lot of short 2-ish hour type games that we got to play. A lot of favorites that have hit the table before plenty of times that a lot of us really like. And then I played a lot of new games that I had never played before at this MartinCon, which was pretty sweet.
Yeah, me too. I played a lot of games. Well, I don't know. I like some of the tried and true classics. I tried some new games, but I don't know how.
Well, there's a reason why those classics come out over and over again. It's because we really like them. So the whole trip doesn't actually start with me. It starts with you. It starts with you and a car trip. Well, yours was longer than just a car trip. So explain how you got here.
I won't get deep into the logistics of getting from Chicago to Madison, but I didn't want to take a 6-hour bus, or Chicago to Minneapolis. So I took a bus to Madison. Then our friend Max drove me and Russian John, or WGN radio listeners will know him as Ice Bag John. We all drove up to Minneapolis from there. Now, Max usually drives up with our other friend Will, and Max and Will apparently last year played the Steam video game.
This is not just last year. This is every trip to Gen Con and every trip to MartinCon.
Are you serious?
Every single trip.
I've been in he drove me 1 year, so this hasn't been going on for a whole decade, but at least
been a while.
Years.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this was my first time experiencing this. He has a computer game version on his MacBook Air of Talisman, the board game. Now, if you've never played Talisman, congratulations.
You shouldn't.
The only way to describe Talisman is Monopoly, but a fantasy board game. and worse.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to describe it, actually.
Yeah, and
it is worse. It is worse because
so
it's even less predictable than Monopoly.
And it is even harder to win.
Yeah.
So in Talisman, basically, you've got like a fantasy character, you've got attack and magic and defense, and you walk around collecting cards. It's a roll of the dice every turn. It's not complete luck because you do have two options. You can go left or right. So there's some choices there. And sometimes it'll be like, oh, draw a card from this deck or draw a card from this deck. So there's some actual play involved, but pretty much it's random.
It's pretty much random.
And the goal is to just collect, get really strong, have a very high attack and magic attack and health and all that, and go to the center and you kill a dragon or something and get a talisman. That's why it's called the talisman.
And you win the game.
Yeah, but you have to get really strong to do that. And you can die. And if you die, you just start again as a new character. It's like Monopoly because the game never ends. Because getting that strong without getting killed by something stupid is nearly impossible. Here's the really fun part. We played with at least 3 expansions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they add extra boards to the
cards.
Board. And cards
right.
and decks.
Yep.
And you have like a dragon track.
Yep.
Somehow manages itself through the whole game and flips and places tokens on squares, which make them more devilish. So to give you an idea of how little progress we made, again, every few turns, you should be collecting a token that makes you stronger. We never, any of the 3 of us, lasted more than 5 turns.
Without dying?
Dying.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that is the most torturous game of Talisman I've ever heard.
Right. Maybe 10 to 12 in certain points, but there was no progress at any point in the game. None of us at any point got closer to beating the game, really. And it was atrocious. And the user interface of
it's really bad
game is actually worse. It makes the game worse. There were turns, and so I decided to helm this because Max was driving, so he shouldn't be playing a computer game. Matt and John was in the back. So I'm controlling this, and I have no idea what I'm doing.
Now, keep in mind, listener, Max is playing this game while driving and still competing because that's the kind of game this is.
Yeah.
You don't actually have to be paying enough attention to play the game.
Yeah, it was dumb. It was dumb, and never play Talisman and just give up on life. So
and before we move on to the next game we're going to talk about, the best thing about this game is there is 0 player interaction with each other. You literally don't interact with the other players in the board game.
You can. I attacked John once.
A little, the most minute bit ever.
You can attack each other and you can steal stuff from each other.
It's not. You generally have very little interaction.
No, well, I attacked them each, which
well done. It was obviously very productive. You guys almost won.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
So Cody spent 7 hours playing Talisman on the way up to get there. Meanwhile, I was playing the iPad version of a game I've talked about before, and I'm not even going to really talk about it because I've literally talked about it on the podcast before. But it's an iPad version of the Star Wars game made by Fantasy Flight called Imperial Assault. It's like it's almost like a dungeon crawling board game, except they came out with an iPad version. It tells the story for you and kind of puts the computer in the role of the bad guys. And so my buddy and I started a new campaign in that and just played a couple of missions of that on the iPad because my buddy Will ended up getting to MartinCon first. He got there Wednesday night. Everybody else arrived Thursday. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we played a couple of rounds of that. That was great on that first night.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll put a link in the show notes to the Imperial Assault iPad version. And then when we all got there, the first game we all played together, I believe, was it the first one we all played together was Avalon?
The first one that we all played together was Avalon. Right before that, our buddy Peter flew in from California, and Peter, Will, and I all played a game called Near and Far. Oh, yeah. And I want to talk a little about Near and Far. Did you get a chance to play it? I can't remember.
Nope.
Okay, so Near and Far was this really interesting board game with a large bound kind of notebook of artwork, and on each of the pages of this was a different map. And the game kind of tells this really long story. It's got these maps that you progress through one after the other. So you like turn the page after you finish playing a round of the game, which takes anywhere from like 2 to 4 hours. And then you're on to the next map. And there's also this big binder that's like a quest book, like a resource book. And quests get randomly generated at the start of each map. And each little node on this map that you can move around has a number. And if a quest randomly gets spawned on this number and you go there, you take out this big resource book and you turn to the page of that quest and you do that quest. So it's got like a randomly generated quest system each time that you play it. And there are quests where if you complete them, it creates a character quest for you that the next time that you come upon another quest, instead of doing whatever random quest is assigned to that node on the map, you just do the next quest in the story mission. So this really big book of quests that you just continue to kind of work through as you're playing the game. You're basically you're making a group of adventurers. You like go recruit a group of adventurers in a tavern, and you use them to go out and do these quests. It's kind of like a resource control, map control type thing where you lay down your tents as you explore places. You're collecting resources, which you then use to buy these artifacts. And the artifacts are really the way the points are scored in the game. They also give you bonuses, oftentimes permanent bonuses to like your attack and health and things like that. But you get resources, you play artifacts, and then at the end, whoever has the most points wins. You kind of keep track of the quests that you've done, and then you move on to the next map. And you push through this entire book of quests. And it's a really unique, interesting thing. So like you're looking at at the start of the game, you get a random hand of artifacts, and it's your job to kind of look at your artifacts and say, what kind of resource building engine can I make out of these? And that's what I'm going to work towards over the course of the game. So
it's kind of like a skill tree that you're developing?
Not a skill tree. No, they've got like random bonuses on them that you need to figure out a way to kind of piece together to make a strong character, basically, so that you can
character.
So that it could be a female character, could be a male character, so that you could expand, as far into the map as you can and kind of take control over as many spaces as you can.
Okay.
The other thing that I just loved about it was its aesthetic. So the quests, and this may sound kind of weird, but like there was very little like conflict and confrontation in the way that quests are written. A lot of them are just like about mischievous magical things that are kind of like causing trouble, but aren't. It's like it's kind of like a really non-violent, whimsical storytelling, and it was really refreshing. It was a really refreshing setting to have for a game, because like there was like an evil witch that was turning people into rabbits by having them drink this tea, right? Like it's that kind of stuff. It was almost like fanciful fairy tale type writing.
So family friendly.
It really was. Yeah, it really was. And it's got these like really muted tones. So it kind of it's supposed to be kind of like post-apocalyptic from what Peter was telling me. So the apocalypse has happened and it was many thousands of years ago. And now this is like the overgrown Earth beyond that.
Wait, why did Peter have to tell you that it was post-apocalyptic?
Post-apocalyptic.
Why did he have to tell you that?
He took before we played the game, and because it
knew that.
It makes more. It puts a lot of the things in the game in context a little better. Like the fact that there's like you're in this fantasy land going through these trails that are like unpaved, but you're a robot, right? Like your character is a robot. Why would a robot exist, right? In like this type of era.
Okay,
so
that makes sense.
It was really cool. I really dug it a lot.
Yeah. So what we haven't done so far is really what we love to do at Game Life Balance on this podcast is recommend games, video games, board games to people based on what audience it's appropriate for. So, for example, I would recommend Talisman to someone I hate and want to ruin their life. Imperial Assault iPad version, I don't know who you would recommend that for. You'd probably recommend it for people that can't
I would recommend it. Yeah, I would recommend it for somebody like me who lives in Minnesota all by themselves with nobody else around and who only gets to see you guys once a year, maybe twice a year. And has this board gaming itch, but doesn't have anybody to play these awesome board games with. So I have this iPad version where you have to have the board game in front of you to play it, and you can kind of play a board game. It's like having a fake friend.
Yeah.
It's kind of nice.
Yeah, which we could all use one of. That's why you're listening to this podcast, right, listener? That's cruel. That's mean.
Yeah, that's very nice. And then near
and far.
Yeah, near and far, I would say would be anybody who likes storytelling. It's not complicated and it's not really a brain burner. So it's definitely it's not Monopoly in terms of its difficulty. It takes some type of planning and skill, but generally it's a relatively easy game. And it's really whimsical. I liked it.
I would love to test that with my wife because she does not.
She would love it. She would love it. Well, so I don't know what her taste in like the actual mechanics of board games are, but she would love the setting and she would love the quest book because that quest book is awesome.
Okay, definitely will try next time.
Yeah. So that night everybody got there. Everybody arrived like 4 hours later and it was chaos. So I think we got a handle of Fireball out. And we decided after we had a couple of drinks already, and we decided that playing Avalon was going to be a good idea.
Yeah, we've definitely talked about Avalon in this podcast before. If you're familiar with Werewolf,
it's Werewolf. It's Werewolf. It's a werewolf-like.
Werewolf being a game where you find out who the bad guy is, but it's a secret. And Avalon works the same way, so it's a very meta game, right? I mean, you're not looking at a board, you're not doing stuff on cards. You're just looking at each other, trying to figure out who's the bad guy, who's the good guy. You're lying at each other. You're lying to each other. It's fun. Great party game. Phenomenal. I played it with my wife's family at Christmas a couple years ago. I've played it at Gen Con a million times. It's our go-to, and it's suitable for about 10. You can up to 10 people.
Oh, it's up to 10.
10 or 12 or something. So there's a lot of people can play at once, which is another really cool thing, right?
It is. It's awesome.
So in this game, there are a couple card variants. If you've played Werewolf, you might play with a priest or what's the other term for it?
A seer. Right?
A seer, right? Excuse me.
Somebody like a good guy that knows who the bad guys are. And then there's going to be like a bad guy that good guy doesn't know. That's his special power.
Right. So there's some different roles. So I bought a used copy of Avalon at the Gen Con auction hall last year, and it came with a bunch of promo cards for Avalon. Like
all of them. It came with like all of the expansions.
Yeah, so it came with a couple of classes that we hadn't played with before. So I decide when we're all drunk and tired that we're going to play with all special cards, half of which were new cards that no one knew what they were. Then in addition to that, I had a really hard time remembering, so I decided to call the start of the game. At the start of the game, everyone closes their eyes, and someone has to call out, like, all right, Seer, open your eyes, look around. Bad guys, open your eyes, look around. Percival, open your eyes and do whatever Percival does. I don't remember any of what I was supposed to do, but I kind of figured it out and then started reading the things. Well, when I said Merlin, wake up and look at the bad guys, Merlin is supposed, or the seer, I guess. It's Merlin in this game.
It's Merlin.
Merlin's supposed to wake up and give the good guys an edge by knowing who the bad guys are. I was Merlin. I said Merlin, wake up. I was so drunk, I forgot I was Merlin. So I went back to sleep.
You didn't wake up.
Rather than restart the game at this point, I decided to
at the start of the game, 2 minutes in, when it would be the easiest thing in the world to restart the game.
Right. I don't start. No, I'm not going to do that. Then someone else, like a bad guy was supposed to see, or no, a good guy was supposed to see who the two bad guys were. And one of the bad guys forgot to put his thumb up.
Yes.
And our friend Peter, who is a troll, a professional troll, did put his thumb up so that
when he wasn't
supposed to. So the joke would be, oh, 3 people have their thumbs up. That's pretty wild. There should only be 2. But one of the people that was supposed to put his thumbs up had forgotten to.
So there were only 2 thumbs up.
So halfway into this game, we all start revealing our roles, exasperated.
No, it was at the end. It was at the end that we all decided that we made it to the end. The bad guys won.
Oh, the bad guys won, yeah. But halfway
there
through,
was no way the good guys could win in the way that game played out.
No one revealed their cards, but halfway through the game, people started saying, no, I'm this. And then explaining what they had done to cheat or do something wrong at the start of the game. So, we're in like the penultimate round and I'm like, you know what? I'm Merlin. I forgot to look. And everyone's looking at me. No one believes me because
nobody would believe you. Stupid. That's the stupidest thing any of us have ever heard.
It was the dumbest game of Avalon ever played.
I won. So I can't say it was the dumbest game.
It was fun-ish, but it was dumb and everything about it was wrong. And, so Avalon.
It was the second best game of Avalon I've ever played.
I recommend Avalon for anybody that ever has a large group and you want to know what to do. If you have a big family, if you have a big anything, like it's just a great game to play.
It is. The only caveat I would say is that Werewolf tends to be able to be a game that is played with a large group of people that don't know each other. Avalon feels like you kind of need to know the people you're playing with to get the most out of it.
I think in either game, what ends up happening is if there's like 6 people that know each other really well, they'll suspect each other much more quickly than they'll expect that stranger that just wandered in.
Sure.
Because no one's going to look at that person and be like, "Oh,
well, they don't know them either. Like they don't know if they're acting different than they normally do." So,
right.
Avalon, really good. Like always. The next, I think then everybody went to sleep. Oh, I think before we played Avalon, did I play Arkham Horror that day or was that the next day?
I don't remember when you played Arkham Horror. I think that was the next day.
Okay.
You played the card game version, right?
No, we played the actual version of Arkham Horror.
Oh, you did?
We did. No, you know what? I played that with Peter and Will as well. So we had enough time to play 2 games. We played Arkham Horror as well after we played Near and Far. Arkham Horror, we've probably talked about it before, but Arkham is a Fantasy Flight property that is based in H.P. Lovecraft's kind of Call of Cthulhu world, right? In his cosmic mystic horror type genre. In this type of horror, it's all about kind of psychological horror, things that are so insane that they can't even be perceived by our normal human perceptions, and they drive you insane. It is my favorite Fantasy Flight setting of all of them. I love science fiction, but just the aesthetic of Arkham, it's kind of got this film noir feel to it, which is just like it makes you instantly think of like smoky back rooms and illegal poker games and like the episodes of Star Trek where Picard is playing the private eye. Like that's the kind of aesthetic that all of these games, this universe creates. So Arkham Horror takes place all in the city of Arkham. There's some sort of ancient old god that is asleep under the city that is getting ready to wake up, and it is your job as a group of investigators to keep this elder god from waking up. So all of this bad stuff starts happening around the city. You have to travel from location to location to seal these gates that pop up, because these gates pop up that lead to this other world, and you have to go inside of the other world, come out and seal them. And you have to seal a certain number of gates to win. We were playing with an expansion, the Dunwich Horror expansion. It just adds an extra piece of board. It adds an extra like city that you can go to. You can go to the city of Dunwich. And if you're not careful, the Dunwich Horror can awaken up there, which quickly makes the big bad guy awaken as well. So that was the board we were playing with. It's got all new encounters and stuff, all new items and everything. And the last time that we tried to play this game, we didn't seal a single gate and the game won. We just got utterly demolished, right? That was my last experience with Arkham Horror. So I was kind of expecting it to go very, very poorly. We played for about 4 hours and we ended up winning, which is the first game of Arkham I've won in a long time. So that was super exciting. It's a really cool game. Again, this game, very much like Near and Far, is all about storytelling. So every single time you go to a location, an encounter happens at the end of your turn, and you draw this little card and you read this encounter for the location. And, there's a deck of maybe 20 to 30 cards per location. So there's still plenty of cards that I haven't ever seen, or encounters that I haven't that I haven't played with. So, and they all kind of work together to make this really emergent story within the game. It's really fun. And it ends up being a super cool story at the end. So, for instance, I was the gangster. That was the gangster character, and I eventually became the sheriff of Arkham because that's the kind of town Arkham is. And I was the gangster sheriff rolling around in the paddy wagon, killing monsters. It was pretty great. It was pretty all right.
Good.
It's pretty all right. So I would recommend playing Arkham. That's Arkham Horror. That's a great game. There's a lot of other games in that universe. There's Eldritch Horror. There's the Arkham Horror board game. And there's honestly, there's tons of other games that they've made in that universe.
Wait, that's what I said. You didn't play the board game.
We played the board game. Okay. Arkham Horror was the board game. There's the Arkham Horror card game as well.
All right, I got you.
We played the board.
And when you go to a location, you draw an event card, much like in Talisman. Which, by the way, Max in the chat said this video is fake news. Cody loved Talisman. I will say that we did stop for lunch, dinner, whatever.
Oh, and you loved lunch.
Love lunch.
You loved lunch. You didn't love Talisman.
Loved lunch. Well, his MacBook Air was dying, and I actually kind of wanted to charge it so we could play it the rest of the way to your place, but only because
you didn't want that.
Only because, and Max did correctly point out that time flew by. I mean, it was a 3 or 4 hour drive. It felt really fast playing Talisman.
That is the only thing I can say to playing Talisman.
Yeah.
The only thing I can say.
I don't know Talisman. Why. If it's because it's
mindless. And I won. I won the last game of Talisman I played in the car, and it was awful.
No, you didn't. Everyone who plays Talisman in the car loses.
Right.
So
that ended up being that first day, and then the next day we woke up. I think.
And you would recommend Arkham Horror to people who are like serious board game people?
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
so
it's not casual.
No, it's not casual. It's a very mechanical game. You know, it's like a 20-page rulebook type thing.
Yeah.
And it's got a ton of systems that are all working together that you kind of have to keep track of. So it is definitely not for just the casual board gamer at all. And it is a serious time commitment too. I mean, if it goes very badly, it can be done in an hour or two. That's a very bad game. Ours was a 4-hour win. And I've played that game for as long as like 8 hours before on some of the more challenging plays of it. So I will say that it is a cooperative board game. So that's really nice. Cooperative games have kind of come into fashion a lot more over the past like 10 to 15 years. And they take a lot of pressure off of that like competitive head-to-head type stuff. So when it's all you against the board, it's like a totally different dynamic.
Yeah, I talk in depth about Eldritch Horror, which is a very similar game, on last year's Martin Con podcast. So I will link to that in the show notes as well. You can check that out if you really want us to get even more in depth with the horror games.
And I won't. And we did play one round of Eldritch Horror. I won't even talk about it, since there is an episode where we talk way more about it.
Was it fun though?
I did have fun. We got destroyed, but it was fun.
Well, there you go. Yeah, and you are correct. The next morning we woke up and we played Chaos in the Old World, which we've also, I think, talked about extensively on this podcast.
We have, and we've talked about how much we love it. And I won that game, and I did not enjoy it.
Yeah, this was weird. The entire time we're just kind of complaining about how bad of a situation you were in, or something. And
it was more that. So it was the first time. Okay, so Chaos in the Old World came out. It was a board. It was a territory control map, and then they expanded it. And they added another character, but they did not expand the board at all. But they allowed an extra player. So it went from like a 4-player game to a 5-player game. We had never played the game 5-player. This was going to be our first time doing that. It was our first time doing that. And there's already a lot of congestion on this game. And in these territories when you play this game with a 4-player game. Mm-hmm. But when you make it a 5-player game, it is nothing. There is nowhere to move basically without there being conflict, and that's fine. That's like the game plays differently with different numbers of players, and sometimes that's a really cool thing in a board game. In this game, I ended up basically sitting in a single territory, and that's literally how I ended up at the end of the game. I was sitting in a single territory and was just doing that for the last maybe 3 turns of the game. Right. And I ended up winning the game, and it felt very unsatisfying. It was a very unsatisfying way to play that game. I didn't feel like I was using any type of strategy. It was basically play whatever card that I could to use up the card slots, because you can only play a certain number of cards in each territory. It was like, get a card there so that you have the effects of that card, and then just kind of wait.
Yeah.
And that was kind of,
Max
how I
in the
felt.
chat is pointing out, I liked that I got 4th and just loved it. And Will also pointing out he could have been a contender at one point. He was close to you, I think, in score.
I think somebody lost to me by 1.
That might have been. That was probably him. Yeah.
I think it was probably him. Yeah. So it was, it ended up being a super close game. But it was, and I think that you were playing a relatively difficult character to use, I think. And I
hate that character, and I'm never playing with him again.
Sure. Well, all right. Well, then we're settled. Still a fantastic game. I'm not one to say after one play of a game that like a game is bad, or I wouldn't play the game again. I think that the dynamic around playing that game with 5 players and as much stuff is happening on that board, it's just something I would have to kind of get used to and be ready for.
Well, the challenge with our particular setup was there are some cards that affect globally everything on the board. And
they're randomized. They're randomized at the start of the game.
And they're randomized. And we ended up with one that made movement extremely prohibitive.
Yeah.
The card essentially said, if you put anything in a space,
they're going to die.
They're going to die at the end of your turn. So that severely limited movement unless you just wanted to place a character for one turn and then get killed. So I think we did end up with just a really bad setup. I would do it again, just not as that character. My only complaint with the game was it wasn't a great, I didn't realize this till after, but I feel like it wasn't a great first game to play in the morning. I think when you're doing a whole board game day or a whole board game weekend, a good way to start is maybe wake up and do maybe a 2 or 3 hour game at the most, kind of as a warm up, and then ease into maybe a 4 or 5 hour game. Because this was a 5 hour game, I think. And
yeah, it was pretty long.
I didn't realize that ahead of time. It's not a complaint or a knock against anybody who suggested it, but it's something. It was a learning for me. I mean, maybe it was just that I lost so badly too, because the first game of the day I had to sit through 5 hours of just getting destroyed, and that sucked hard. Especially since Ryan was there, being a monstrous little troll monster demon hellspawn that was literally just trying to mess with me the whole game. So, I mean, when you wake up first thing in the morning, jump into a 5 hour game, know you're going to lose by the end of the second turn, and people are just messing with you at that point, like, it kind of kills the day. And then after that, I was like,
to be fair, I kind of felt like I was going to lose for almost all of that game. And then within the last 2 or 3 turns, it just things changed.
But then you won. Then you won. And
but you were in a situation where you weren't having fun because you felt like you were completely non-competitive. It was the exact same position I was in for the entire game. I felt that way.
It gave me a little bit of a weird vibe for the day, but otherwise, nothing to complain about that game. That game, I think we would give the same suggestion as someone who wants to buy Eldritch Horror or Arkham Horror. I think it is for advanced gamers that like very long rules and instructions and lots of strategy and thinking, and it's a pretty good game. And Max in the chat says, my level of play was embarrassing, incredibly embarrassing. He was embarrassed for me. Thank you for that.
Yeah. So after that, I think we split up. Did we play Terraforming Mars once?
Yep, we split up, and then you and I played Terraforming Mars together with both expansions. I knew there was an extra board game, and there was an extra board expansion where you get 2 additional boards to play with.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize that there was a Venus expansion, which was new to me.
Yeah, and it was really cool. So Terraforming Mars is a game where you're literally terraforming Mars. It's an engine building game.
You open the box and you
open the box and you terraform Mars.
Yeah, and we were on Mars for a few hours. It was great. The view was good.
And I think we did pretty well terraforming it.
high-fived Elon.
Yeah, it's an engine building game. So you draft these cards and they work together. You have to figure out a way to make them work together. You have to use what limited resources you have to play these cards. They give you special abilities to then do other stuff. And eventually you can play things on the actual board, which is in front of you. And the stuff that you play are things like greeneries and oceans and things to make Mars a habitable planet. And so like you draft these cards and there's not a lot of interaction with other players as you're playing the cards in front of you. But there's a ton of interaction when it comes to what you're placing on the board in front of you. And the game just has this I love it. It has just this great balance of paying attention to what you are doing and then paying attention to what's happening on the board. And I feel like there's tons of different ways to create an engine that works. Everybody plays a slightly different, some of them are quite different, corporation that is working to terraform Mars. And they like have an inherent strategy to them, but then you also have to rely on whatever cards you draw and are able to play as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really love it. I
love the game, but I feel like it's not a 5-star game. Like, I don't feel like it's a fantastic game. I feel like I've run into various balance issues from time to time playing it. I mean, that's just the nature of the game. I don't know. Like, to me, it feels like Civilization, the video game. Like, I really like Civilization. I'll dig in, I'll jump in and play like a 40-hour game. But there comes a point where it's just kind of like going through the motions and you're just like doing what you can do. That's not what I'm saying about Terraforming Mars, but I don't know. There's our friend Peter pointed out one time that there could be some like balance issues with it. And ever since he said that, that stuck with me. And now every time I play and something weird happens, or somebody plays a card that really screws somebody, or somebody's like not drafting any good cards, I think to myself like, oh, it must be a weakness of the game. I don't know.
I think the maybe the one criticism that is fairly easy to level against the game is, I would say maybe 75% of the game is the cards in front of you, and then 25% are what you end up putting on the board. Because a lot of times those cards in front of you are the engine to put stuff on the board. And those cards are, after the draft at the start of the game, those cards are totally randomized. So you really could just have a string of horrendous luck when you're drawing those cards, because everybody's drawing the same number of cards each turn. Mm-hmm. And that can really be prohibitive in terms of I guess your strategy. But that's kind of the whole gag to an engine building game, is you work with what resources you have available to create some sort of economic engine the best that you can. So I mean, that's a fairly standard practice. I think maybe it's just that those decks of cards are huge, right? There's a lot to sift through.
Yeah, I will say my criticisms by and large are not valid, and I could just be really bad at the game.
You've won the game plenty of times, haven't you?
I've won a couple times. Last year I went on a bit of a streak and I won that and Chaos in the Old World, which was insane to me. But yeah, I would recommend Terraforming Mars. I think there's a little less difficulty compared to maybe Chaos in the Old World or an Arkham Horror game. What do you think?
For sure. Yeah.
It's a little more accessible. So if you're kind of moderately into the strategy stuff and you like to just kind of build up your own little kind of mini civilization on Mars, it's a great game. It's
also a great aesthetic if you're into like near sci-fi type stuff. And it's got this kind of cute art style. There's a lot of really great jokes and things.
It's very funny
on the cards, which is really nice to see. And yeah, it is not like a casual game by any means, because there are a lot of systems working together again, but it is more accessible than like the last game we just talked about.
Yeah, super fun. Like I said, again, I love the game.
And also it's kind of a non-confrontational competitive game. There's not a lot of like direct player screwage, which is kind of nice. That can be kind of nice.
Yeah. No, I mean, a lot. 6 times out of 10, 7 times out of 10, if somebody's like, "What game do you want to play?" I'll say Terraforming Mars. I mean, I really enjoy it. So, but with the caveat that I don't know, it's something weird is about it, or I'm bad. But yeah, then we all played this other game a bunch.
Which game is the other game? What are we talking about?
The next one on the sheet. We also played Mystic Vale.
I want to talk about Mystic Vale.
Well, we have to because we played it like 80 times.
We all did. Everybody was playing it. I had never played it. I only got to play it one time. I had never played it. And you had played it, right?
Yeah, I played it at... our friend Will has some friends at his place in Madison. He calls it Madison Con, not his last name Con. Why don't you call it Minneapolis Con, John? Why do you have to be so egocentric?
Because it takes place all within the confines of my house.
So does the other one.
I definitely stayed at Max's condo when I went to Madison Con.
Oh, fine.
So Oh my gosh. So Mystic Vale is it's a deck building game.
Think Dominion.
So let's talk about Dominion, right? It's exactly like Dominion in terms of I'm gonna have a board. I'm gonna use what resources come up on this card draw to buy something in the middle, and then that's going to make my deck bigger. And then when I'm done, I'm going to shuffle my deck, and I'm going to do that again. That is like the standard deck building setup for a game. Mystic Vale's cool little thing that it does, and I think it is genius, is every card has a clear plastic sleeve, and the artwork is done in such a way so that cards have basically 3 different slots on them, and you can take a card and put it inside that plastic sleeve, and as long as one of those 3 slots is open where you're putting that card in, it basically modifies and enhances the card.
Yeah. 3 horizontal slots and 1 vertical slot.
Yes, and a vertical slot, right. And there's a bunch of symbols on that card that allow you to buy different stuff, and there's symbols on that card that give you points, and it is a deck building game that has it figured out a way to, like, in a normal deck building game, there's usually a way to discard cards that you don't want in there to kind of keep your deck lean and keep the better cards drawn more frequently. This card doesn't have any kind of discard. Instead, it has the ability to add stuff to other cards rather than adding cards to your deck to keep your deck lean that way. And with those enhancements, it creates these combination of cards that are not limitless, but it sure feels that way when you're playing the game in terms of putting cards together.
Yeah, your deck size is finite and it's constant through the whole game. Your deck is maybe 25, 35 cards total. And
it's a finite deck building game. I mean, that's like,
yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah, because you're not adding new cards. Like John said, again, some of the cards have negative consequences on them. Some have positive, some are neutral. And you can augment those cards by slipping in these clear, these mostly transparent cards, I guess, like plastic. I mean, they're not cards, but they are in the shape of cards. These plastic screens over them that are mostly transparent, except for one of the 3 slots is taken up. So yeah, you just end up changing it, and that gives you, like John said, so much. You can make the bad cards better. You can make the good cards even better. You can make the good cards worse if you want them to have a bunch of benefits, but maybe a little bit of drawback. Or you can mess with the neutral cards, or you can leave the neutral cards alone, and then you get bonuses for having neutral cards. I mean, it's quite good. Quite good.
Yeah. And I only got to play it once, so I can't really speak to how varied the kind of the win conditions are, but it felt like there were a couple of different strategies that you could kind of employ depending on which hero you were, and have those strategies be viable.
Yeah, there are two different sets of currencies. One is mana, which is you straight up use to purchase things. The other is these nature symbols, and those buy different cards that can either give you really strong abilities or insane numbers of points.
They put like permanent bonuses out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've found that the mana strategy isn't as great as the other one, but like, yeah, there's a bunch of different ways to play, and you can always do something with what you're dealt with. It's just I played it at least 6 times over the weekend. I mean, literally, and I won once, I think, maybe twice. No, I think I just won once. But it's just really, really fun. It's so addictive. It's fun to slide the things in there. Yeah, it's
also very quick. It is
very quick.
It is an easy game to understand. There's no player interaction, which I think you maybe could consider a criticism. Other than you're just vying for the same cards in the middle. Yeah. But you're never interacting directly with other players. So if that's kind of your cup of tea, but this feels like a good gateway game. It feels like the type of game you introduce to somebody who, maybe doesn't know anything about designer board games.
Mm-hmm.
But you're like, look at this. Like, this is a game where you get to slot cards in one another and like change these cards in your deck. I mean, it is a super neat game. It is super neat.
And the first few times I told people about it, I could never remember the name because it's like the most generic name.
It's a really generic fantasy
Mystic
name.
Vale. But 10 out of 10. And of course, I go on Reddit and I was reading about some board games and somebody mentioned, I searched for Mystic Vale on Reddit because I wanted to see what people thought. And somebody was just like, oh, well, yeah, it's just a generic, oh, yeah, you cycle, oh, it's not very well balanced. Oh, if you like no play internet, I don't know. People are always nitpicking. And I don't know. I looked at that and I'm just like, really? Is there any game that everybody likes?
No.
Probably not.
No. And I don't know if it's well balanced. I literally only played it a single time.
Yeah,
so
it's weird.
I don't know, but I know that I had a really fun time playing. I mean, I got killed. Like the person who won more than doubled my score. But it was super fun to play.
And there are expansions with heroes that further augment the game, and they have really interesting mechanics that are really fun. What I do find is interesting is that the first few times we played, a few of our friends said, oh, I've never gotten more than 25 points, or I've never gotten more than 30 points. And then there were 2 games in a row where first one of our friends, I don't remember which one, and then the last game that I played, got like 60 some point, 50 or 60 some, like an insane amount of points. And everybody else was like in your game trailed way behind. And it was like, what's going on? So
I had like 24 and I was in second after the winner got 52.
Yeah. So, but a lot of the games that we used to play that I played originally, the first games I had played were a lot closer. So yeah, I don't know about the balance or anything, but it's always fun to play with, and the visual aesthetic is phenomenal, and it's a really good game. I highly recommend Mystic Vale, either for a gateway entry game or for anybody else who loves strategy board.
That night, done with Mystic Vale now. That night we played a game called Rising Sun. Let's talk Rising Sun for a minute. Rising Sun was, in terms of our experience with it, it was an interesting experience for me. So our buddy Max bought Rising Sun. He did the Kickstarter for it, and one of the Kickstarter benefits was he got every single expansion to it at the same time as well. So he brought all of them. It was about 8 boxes, I think. I'm serious. I think it was about 8. I think it was about 8 boxes. And the first thing I'll remember about him setting up the game was him like taking out these boxes, and the figures are all plastic in there, but every faction has their like own box with these plastic molding, like these plastic molded pieces that the figures fit into. I mean, the production on this thing is, I have never seen a game produced like this ever in terms of its figures. Maybe there's some games with like a lot of stuff in the box, but in terms of just the fidelity of the figures, there is no other game that is like this. Mm-hmm. So we all picked our factions, and he put out the board, and the board was this like beautiful play mat. It was just it was like this soft, cushy material, and it was just it was gorgeous. And he had like hand painted some of the neutral figures that you can buy throughout the game, and those were beautiful. Everything about the look of this game was honestly incredible. I was pretty blown away.
And the aesthetic is feudal Japan, so it's got the old Japanese art style. The figurines are all not samurai and shoguns.
I don't know exactly when it takes place because I don't know anything about Japanese history, but it takes like, there's no guns or anything. It's it's samurai and swords, and then it's got a lot like this mystical quality to it. There's praying to gods, and there's basically monsters that you can conjure to be on your team, and these monsters are these neutral things that Max had painted that are just huge. Like some of them are the size of the entire territory that you're putting them into on the board. I mean, it's incredible. They are just incredible. Some of them probably weigh over a pound. I think some of these figures probably are over a pound. And these plastic figures. So it's just, the game looks incredible. It's a territory control game, and everybody plays a different faction, and they all play a little differently. And I don't know if I liked it.
Also, our friend Will in the chat says, point of order, fox dudes have primitive firework guns.
So it's a territory control game where you're getting points for basically conquering these territories at the end of each war phase. And there's only 3 war phases over the course of the game. So you have to eat as much territory as you can over those 3 war phases. And I maybe it was the combination of classes that we were using, but like the game felt drawn out in a way that it felt like it shouldn't. And it just I don't
point of order, at when we played this game, you and I were toasted.
So we
were obliterated.
Yeah. So, but that's not the point.
It kind of is part of the point. That's context. That's important context. I was out of my mind. I barely knew where I was.
Yeah. So the thing is, like, I've played a lot of like territory control games, right? Like, and I don't know if I don't think this was a good one. At least not with maybe the number of players that we were playing, or again, just like the combination of stuff. But it felt imbalanced to me.
How?
In a way. How did it feel imbalanced?
Yeah.
Because there's so much emphasis in the game placed on, there's so many systems in the game that like I can't go through them to the listener right now in terms of why they kind of work together. But the person who won had a character class. Basically, they had a one of their factions that could fight everywhere they wanted to, and by fighting and killing yourself, you can get points in this game. Also, by fighting and not contributing any resources to the fight, you can get a lot of resources. You get a lot of money from other people. So by fighting everywhere, he was just able to get resources from places he didn't really care about. He was also able to kill himself in places that he had a couple of people that he could just get some points for. And it very quickly became apparent that like that was going to be a very easily winning strategy in the game. And nobody else had the ability to spread the way that he was able to do, to kill himself all over the board. Right? Like it was what the faction that he was playing as, it was what they were meant to do, for sure. But it didn't feel balanced to me. It really didn't.
Well, I will temper that with, it was 7 or 8 p.m. and somebody said, hey, we're going to have dinner in about an hour. Let's play this game. It should take an hour or two. It took 2 hours to set up.
Oh, God. It was, yeah.
And then 4 to 5 hours to play, which is fine for a board game weekend. That's why you do board game weekends.
Yeah.
But you don't do that after being told, oh, this will take an hour or two. So I wasn't committed. The
biggest shame about the whole thing was that there was obviously so much care and production and love that was put into the creation of everything in that game. And then it was so reminiscent of me. And we talked about this after Gen Con last year. There was a game that I had played that was called, God, I can't even remember now, but it was a similar thing where it was very much like Arkham Horror or Eldritch Horror or Chaos in the Old World, or Chaos in the Old World mostly is what it was like, only it was set with like in the Call of Cthulhu universe, and all the figures were enormous and beautiful. And I just got done playing that game and it just didn't feel like a fun game. And that's the biggest shame, is that just like I'm not even doing it justice to describe to you. The description I gave of all of the stuff in this box does not even do it justice. I mean, it is gorgeous.
It's more elaborate than any board game you have ever unboxed.
Seriously. It was amazing. It was seriously amazing.
I will still caveat it with the fact that I was not committed. Half the people you were playing with were just out of their minds.
Well, and we were also, none of us had ever played it before. So it was a learning game. It was a learning game for everybody. It was the wrong time to play that game. We
tried it once. It was the wrong kind of the time to play it. If it had been like, hey, let's play this 6-hour game all day, like, great. I'm in. I'm ready for that mentally. But my mental preparation was like several shots of Fireball and God knows whatever else I put in my body that night. And I was not going to contribute anything. My partner and I, Ryan, was on a team.
You were the only one with a partner.
Yeah, he fell asleep an hour into the game at the table, sitting up, and
I don't think he was committed.
It was not an ideal circumstance to, I think, very accurately assess the playability or quality of a game. So take what I still think. I know you're an expert in board games. You've got a ton of experience. I think maybe take Jon's feedback with a grain of salt. I would love to revisit Rising Sun after we've had a chance to play it again, which I would actually like to play it again.
I would like to play it again as well.
Yeah, when I'm like conscious. So I think, first impression's not great in terms of some of the gameplay elements, let's say, I think is a fair way to temper your arguments. Again, not taking away from your legitimacy, but just in the state and you were not sober either.
I would like to play it without the character class that ended up winning that game.
Also, and lots of games have that, where there's that one character that kind of breaks everything. That's a ton of games.
Sure. It still doesn't diminish what I'm saying, is I would like to try that game again without that character class.
Oh, yeah, no, sure. Well, that's fair. Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're giving context. But and that game, I would say, you want to talk about the right target audience for that? People who this is a very advanced game. This is like Arkham Horror Advanced, Chaos in the Old World Advanced, and with a lot of hardware. So you better have a bookshelf, because it was literally
it also needs a huge amount of space to play.
Yeah,
the table. It was that giant table that we were playing at was almost not even big enough for what we needed.
But it's a beautiful game. Oh my god, that board and everything.
Yeah, it is beautiful.
Yeah.
So then we went to bed and we woke up, and I think the next day we played a couple of rounds like Mystic Vale, but then we played the new Civ game.
Sid Meier's Civilization, a new dawn.
A nude dawn.
Dawn has come for the era of kings. Will you skyrocket to the heavens, or will you worship a god that will take down the rest of society? Only you can determine the civilization you will build.
What is this?
I'm being Sean Bean.
Are you?
No.
No. That was
that was bad.
This is your game, right?
I own it, but Will brought it. This is my third time playing this game, which is probably why I won, because I played against you and someone else who only played it once, I think. Once or twice.
Before we even start talking about it, I will say that I literally made the same mistake that I make when I play Civ on the computer, and that is neglecting military. It is literally the exact same mistake that I generally make.
And the mechanic, I think I warned you about this. I think I warned somebody we were playing with, do not underestimate military. First time I played this game, I didn't do anything in military, and I was playing with my wife and Icebag John, and we're all building civilizations. It's all going great, just like the video game where you're in like turn 200 and you're like, oh, look at this beautiful Civ I've built, but you didn't really think about military. Then some idiot declares war on you, and suddenly in 3 turns, you've lost half your resources. That's what happens to me in the computer game. That's what happened to me the first time I played the game. That's what I did to you. Oh, it was Max that we play with. That's what I did to you. And was it Max? Who did we play with? Why can't I remember?
Max or Will? Or it could have been Peter.
No, we didn't play with Peter because Peter wanted to play, but we didn't end up playing with Peter. Why? What is wrong with me? All right, it doesn't matter. They're both watching, by the way. So Will and Max.
I think it was Max. It was Max.
You better hope it was Max.
It was Max.
Either we're gonna make 2 of our friends mad, or 0 of them mad.
It was Max.
Well, now Max has just said, "LOL." They remember nothing about me. Look, I remember that you brought Rising Sun, Max. So
I think it was mostly because you were right in between the 2 of us, so we didn't interact with each other a single time in the game.
That's right. I was between the 2 of you, so there's no...
We literally didn't interact the entire board game.
Wait,
Max
did we play with Max and Will? Was it a 4-player game?
It definitely wasn't that. Definitely wasn't that.
The only reason I remember you playing is because you wanted to play the game. I don't remember a lot from that weekend, let's be clear. It doesn't matter. This is the new Fantasy Flight board game of Civilization. It plays exactly like the video game in every way. It was just Max. Thank you, Max.
That's literally what I said.
God, I feel like an idiot. But I fell asleep halfway in Rising Sun. Don't worry about it. I play it just like the video game. I think it's really fun. It goes pretty quickly. If you neglect military, you will absolutely lose. And that is the one only, I said this at the start of the game when I was explaining the rules, because there's 5 different things, right? You've got like economy, trade, maybe that's the same thing, like military, science, culture, like in civilization, military, science, culture, I think religion or something. And then
trade,
the last one, the war, right? Military. So I said at the start of the game, I'm explaining like each thing, and I was like, okay, trade does this, it's pretty simple. All right, production does this, it's pretty simple. Science does this, it's really simple. Military, you have to pay attention to this. It's a little more complicated. You have to understand this concept. And Max is like, nah, it's not that complicated. And I was like, no, well, it's not that complicated, but you have to understand military.
Yeah, it's not that complicated.
If you don't understand that you need to reinforce your control tokens and you have to have like little troops all over the place, you will get destroyed. And you had like 3 cities. They were awesome. They had wonders. You had all this production. And then I got flight, which is a military advancement. And I just took over all of your cities.
I think having not played the game before, I think I didn't realize what the defense values of stuff was.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was a big part of it, because the only other context I had for a Civ board game was the edition that came before this one. And in that game, cities had an inherent very large value no matter where they were built. Their defense value was inherently just large.
Mm-hmm.
So you couldn't start taking them until midway into the game. Whereas in this game, your city's defense value is based on where they're built. So if they're built on like a plains, you could start sacking cities at the start of the game.
Yeah.
If you wanted to. And like, I didn't quite realize that until it was too late. And like, my cities actually aren't reinforced all that well. They're all built on plains. They all have no defense. So it was very easy for you just to come and bum rush them. And the game swings. It swings really hard. And that was something that I also did not realize until it happened, like until we were in that moment that was happening. And it was also something that was not in a previous edition of the game. So like, I came to it with too much preconceived notion about what I was getting myself into, is what happened.
Did you have fun? Did you enjoy it?
I did. And it was probably actually the game that I thought about the most after we were done playing it, and thought about like the ways I would play it differently, because that game should have been about 2 hours longer. Seriously, it should have been a much longer game, because the only reason you were able to win was because I made it so easy for you to come in and take over my cities. If I had just spent like a couple extra turns reinforcing rather than spreading out as I was doing, you wouldn't have been able to just come in and sack those cities and get the things that you needed to win the game. So I like looking back on it and seeing how big of a flaw that was within the way I was playing the game. I think there could have been a much closer game for everybody.
I do have yet to play it with everyone at the table being an experienced player. And I think that would be really interesting, because I just haven't done that yet. So yeah, I want to try that. But I would say this is a game I would say it's a little easier of a game. I think mechanically
it is.
You can go deeper, as you can with any board game with the strategy. But I mean, I've played it with my wife. I've played it with people who are more casual gamers, don't do a lot of strategy board gaming. And the mechanics of how you play is very, very simple. Like, you know what to do on a turn. Here's how you take your turn. You literally pick a card, do what it says, and you have 5 cards in front of you permanently. It's those cards. Pick one of those 5 cards, do what's on it, and then your turn is over. Not really hard.
I'll be honest. I walked away from the experience like kind of down on it, because it felt like for all of us, we were all kind of building. And then within a turn, everything forever, like it literally went from, it looks like anybody could win, to there is no way that anybody but you could win, right? Like it felt like it swung so hard, but the only reason why it swung that hard was because I did not do a good job of reinforcing myself to make it so that you couldn't just march in there.
100%. So that's what happened the first game I played. John beat us in 2 turns, and it was the same exact scenario. It was 3 civilizations are doing great. Oh, one of them has flight, one has advanced military. Bye other 2, and it's 2 turns. Like the snap of a finger. Absolutely 2 turns.
Yeah, and that part was unsatisfying, but it was mostly just because I did not play. Yeah, I did not play it well. So yeah, I definitely want to try that one again.
Yeah, but I would recommend the New Civilization and New Dawn game. So I know we're going a little long, but we only have 1 or 2 board games left. We've talked about Ethnos on this podcast? Maybe.
I don't know if we really have.
Did you play that with us?
I didn't play it with you, but I have played it once before.
Okay, so Will bought this at Gen Con this year, and it's fast, it's easy, it's fun. it's got very bad board art. Like you look at the board for the board game,
it's just cheap looking, right? It's just really cheap looking,
generic. It looks like somebody drew like a crayon or whatever, which we've all admitted. I mean, Will is like, yeah, it doesn't look great, but it's a fun game. It's very, very easy to play. There's a decent amount of player interaction with what cards you're taking from each other. There's some luck involved. It's up to 4 players trying to take, or maybe that's up to 5 players, 4 or 5 players. And you're just taking control of 5 or 6 different territories by playing these different monster cards, basically, and putting control tokens on each territory. And the monster cards kind of play like Uno. You know how Uno, you have to have when you play cards in Uno, you play either the same.
Draw 4, reversal.
Okay, so not that, but you either play the same color or the same number. And it's the same way with this game. You play either the same color monster, because there's like gray, red, green, etc., or you play the same monster regardless of the color. And you draft cards one at a time. You take turns basically drawing cards. And then as soon as you play any combination of cards, you discard all the other cards in your hand, put them face up. So now the next guy, he doesn't have to draw from the deck. He can pick one of those face up cards. So you're kind of providing each other with the resources. So you have to be aware and careful not to discard a bunch of cards that the other players can use, but then also play good hands at the same time. And it goes pretty quickly. It's pretty easy to learn. I would say it's another good entry-level game that can get a lot deeper. And we did play with an expansion that had either like a goblin or a troll or something, where you get a separate board and you can kind of save up tokens to use later in the game to get points. But it's quick. It's simple. It takes an hour or 2 to play at the most. And again, pretty simple mechanics. I would highly recommend Ethnos. If you've ever played Colossal Arena, which I know isn't like a fundamental game in the board game world, but Colossal Arena, it kind of plays like that, but with tokens, I think, in a way, because you're playing with monsters and kind of in a way betting. They're very radically different, but I would say the same level of complexity maybe. So if you've played Colossal Arena, you would really enjoy this game.
I think it's a little like Small World as well.
I've not played Small, or I don't remember playing Small World. So.
I'm pretty sure it feels a little like Small World. So if that's I think a much more popular game that a lot of people probably have played. So if you want to give it some context, it's a little like that.
All right. And do you remember that time we spent 10 minutes trying to remember who we played Civilization with?
That just happened. That just happened. When was that?
The worst thing. So yes, you didn't play that. And then Eldritch Horror, we kind of glossed over, but you can check the show notes for other podcasts. We've talked about Code Names before. Great party game, fun party game, fast party game. You like it, right?
Yeah, Code Names is great.
Code Names is fun. I have Code Names Duet, play with my wife. We have fun. Jackbox Party Pack we played on the Nintendo Switch. We've talked about that before too, I think, after New Year's or something.
Basically, it's a trivia game that you can connect with on your phone. It's a genius, right? It's a genius way to use new technology to make a large group of people able to play a game together. Because you have it on like one system. You can get it for PC, you can get it for Switch, you can get it for it's on every console. It's on PS4, it's on Xbox. It is literally on everything. And only one person needs to own it. And then you basically set up a room that is on a website, and everybody just connects to the website with their phone and just types in a code, and then you're all connected to the same game.
Yeah, just make sure your video console's connected to the internet, and it'll literally say, go to jackbox.tv, enter this 4-digit code, and then you're in on your phone, which is insane.
And everybody's in the same game, and sometimes you're drawing stuff on your phone, which can obviously be fantastic in a group of drunk people. Sometimes you are just answering trivia questions. Sometimes you're like making your own questions for people to answer. It's really neat.
Yeah, it's good. And then we all saw Deadpool 2, which 2 thumbs up, I guess.
It was so good.
It's very funny.
It was very funny.
Very funny movie. And you went running outside in 7,000 degree weather.
It was 95. It was horrendous. It took me an hour to get cool again.
God, the entire weekend it was like 100 degrees in Minnesota, which is weird.
It was super weird. It was
been that warm since?
Nope, not a single day.
Yeah,
it
Chicago's been like a cold wave.
Super unusual for Minnesota at that time.
And now you're back in the cold.
It's not cold. It's like 75.
Okay, we've had days in the 60s like the last 2 weeks in Chicago.
That's pretty cool.
It's weird.
Cool. Yeah. So, but yeah, I went out and ran almost, I think, every day with a different group of people each day. It kind of felt like.
Yeah. Oh, so as you were winding down, you finished your last game of Eldritch Horror. A lot of people went to bed, hung out with a couple people. I think we played some Mystic Vale, drank a little, did whatever. And then, all right, Ryan and I are going to go downstairs, sleep in your living room downstairs. Your PC's down there. And I'm like, all right, this is it.
This is it. This is my time.
This is my time. It is Sunday night going into Memorial Day. All I have to do tomorrow is wake up, drive back with Max, and pass out. And I'm going to have a lot of quality time with my wife this week because I haven't seen her in a few days. So I should play some Final Fantasy 14 while I've got a chance. Why not?
Yeah, everybody's asleep.
Now is my chance. It's asleep. Everybody's asleep. It's 1 a.m. I got 8 hours ahead of me. Let's do this. I go to log on to Final Fantasy 14, which I had downloaded all the patches on your computer. It was all up to date. And they were doing server maintenance.
I'm going to flip this damn table over. You know why I'm going to flip this damn table over? Because who does server maintenance on a holiday weekend where people are off work? Who does that?
I lost my mind. I was so mad. Like, it was the worst moment of my life.
Listen, I've had those moments with World of Warcraft. I had those when I was playing that game. I can feel your seething anger right now because I have totally been there before. But one thing that they were always good about with World of Warcraft was at least timing the maintenance so that it made sense. It was always a Tuesday morning unless there was some sort of emergency thing happening.
It was emergency. Sound effects.
I don't believe it.
Sound effects were off sync with spells. And so the experienced raiders couldn't clear the harder trials.
Are you an experienced raider?
No.
And who cares?
Dude, it was the worst. Yeah. It was the worst. And then you know what? The karma came back to bite Square Enix in the butt because they had the worst E3 press conference of all time.
That was really bad.
Maybe not of all time, but it was pretty awful.
It was pretty bad.
So that was...
You didn't, yeah, that's a bummer. You didn't get to play the final... You got to play Final Fantasy 14 for just a very brief amount of time, I feel like, over the weekend. I even douwnloaded it and patched it right when you got there.
That was very, very nice of you. And well, you know how it is. I mean, you've gone to Gen Con before and gone to the E-Games Arena just to play single player games just because you don't always get to do it when you're, in marriage.
Yeah.
life.
No, I played League of Legends for a couple of hours, I think, one year at Gen Con, and it was awesome because I hadn't been able to do that since my son was born. So yeah, that was awesome.
That's not why I go to Martin Con. I don't need that, but if I've got 8 hours to sleep, then that's the time to do it. But whatever, that's not here nor there. One other quick thing on the drive home, there was no talisman, thank God. But I was sitting in the back with Will, who drove back with us, and he had Civilization 6 on his iPad. And he set up a local game with him and me versus 2 AI opponents. And we passed the iPad back and forth and played a local game of Civ 6. And it was awesome. I loved it.
Yeah. I knew that they released it and they released it at a $60 price. It's a $60 full price game app.
It should be.
I know. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but how many games on the iPad or on some sort of touch device have you seen that come out at $60? None, right? I don't think there's been one. So I think that's pretty interesting that they did we're gonna do this full price. Hey, what's before we go, I had requested that you bring back a bag that I left at your wedding, which was in October, right? Of last year. So it's been a long time coming since I got that bag back.
8 months.
Yeah, but you brought it back and you brought it in and you just kind of left it in the kitchen and we didn't actually move it until you guys all left. And I picked it up. I was like, shit, this is really heavy. Like this bag is really heavy. I'm going to go unload it because all the clothes in there were dirty. So I got upstairs and there was just a big ball in the bag. It was a big ball and it said Vinyl Boy on it. And I don't know what it is. I have no idea what it is.
Do you have it with you to show?
It's not down here.
You don't have it to show to the listeners?
I will show it next week. I will show it. Well, I would have to go get it.
And I can't tell the story till next week.
Okay. The next week we'll talk about Vinyl Boy, but this ball, it's probably about 20 pounds, you think?
Hey, if you've got a scale, please measure it. I'm curious.
I think it's about 20 pounds. Is it filled with something? We'll have to wait for the story.
We'll have to wait.
We'll have to wait for the story.
And we'll also have to wait for Kirby Superstar because we did not have time to play that during MartinCon because we had so much fun playing board games.
Yeah, we're going to end up doing that single player, which is too bad because it really is like one of the best 2-player games that's on that.
Or I might come up to, who knows, I might come see you this summer.
You totally could.
Casey wants to come visit, so we could, before you have your next baby.
Definitely be a weekend thing.
So yeah.
Sure. But, if you want it to be before the next baby, it's gonna have to be in the next like 4 weeks. Because it's coming up pretty quick here.
Dang.
We put together the nursery this past weekend.
Pretty good.
So it's like real. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. It's awesome.
Well, yeah, that's cool. So next week we will be doing Super Punch Out.
Yeah, and I think, are we going to try to do it in a week? We probably could, right?
We'll try to sometime soon.
Either a week or 2 weeks, but I think we could probably do a week.
Yeah, I don't know.
We'll see.
We'll figure out the schedule. But if you check our feed, if you follow our audio podcast, so if you're watching this on YouTube, you're out of luck. But I interviewed the author of The Minds Behind the Games, which is a brand new book. It's in the top 20 books on Amazon right now in the gaming category. The author is Patrick Hickey Jr. And we found each other on Twitter, and I got to interview him for this podcast. So check the Game Life Balance US podcast feed. Check out our website, gamelifebalance.us. And I've got this interview with this guy, Patrick. He is super cool. It was really exciting. He's talked to the developers, the minds behind the games. He talks to the guys that did E.T., the guys that developed NBA Jam, the guys that developed WWF WrestleMania, the arcade game, like all these classics that you've heard of and played. Some newer games. He talked to the guys who did Night Trap. It's very cool. It's a cool book, and you can find information on that interview in the show notes. Everything. So depending on when you listen to this, I don't know if this will come out. It'll probably already be out by the time you hear this. Probably. So, but just follow Game Life Balance US to find that. It was like a kind of a thing out of nowhere we did during the day when Jon was working. So it's just me and that one. Very different than our usual format, but it should be a lot of fun.
Yeah. #content.
#content is so good. But we'll get back to Super Punch Out in the next episode and then get back to RPGs and stuff later. In the meantime, we should probably wrap really quickly with a couple things that are happening on the Gonna Geek Network right now. Do you have the thing up?
Take it away. I do. So let's talk about better podcasting. Well, by the way, we're members of in a network called the Gonna Geek Network. It's got a bunch of different shows on there that span the gamut of geeky topics. This one of the podcasts is called Better Podcasting. In episode 134, Podcasting Without a Computer, promos, ever been in a situation that you wished you could podcast without a traditional computer, desktops, laptops? In this week's episode, Stephen and SP run down a variety of different ways you could podcast and ways they have podcasted in these situations. Check out this and more in this week's Better Podcasting. And then in the official Gonna Geek show, it's Gonna Geek show number 242, Gonna Bend iPhones. The GFQ Network's Suncast guests on this week's episode of the official GonnaGeek.com show to discuss a whole bunch of geek news, including voice assistants coming to Xbox, Microsoft buying GitHub, more success with Virgin Galactic, and there's even an update to Apple's Bendgate years later. Check out all this and more in this week's official GonnaGeek.com show.
Very funny episode. They talk about touching things. I won't get into it. And on Game Life Balance Australia this week, we've got episode 60, The Crime of Milk Baggery. They are our sister show, Game Life Balance Australia. They wrote something in the promo sheet, and I'm not going to read it because I'm going to tell you from memory what happens. AC spends about at least a half hour raging over the fact that Canadians get their milk in bags. And you would think that the Fourth World War has started. It's the greatest thing ever. And then that's honestly all I remember. That's all I remember from the episode is they talk
Who knew that Australia and Canada were pitted against each other in this duel to the death over the way to store and buy milk?
But you know what's fun about it is I don't feel like a lot of people can do that with the US because there are so many Americans who just get so angry at anything you say. Like, oh yeah, over in America, oh what, you guys are kind of fat, right? What you talking about? Yeah, boy, I got my America's the greatest country, blah, blah, blah. You know, like it's, I don't know.
It's almost like there was an American here in the room just now.
It's
like gosh, was that you?
I don't think that there are many Americans who cannot take themselves lightly. Like they have to take everything very seriously, especially America. And like, well, Game Life Balance US, but that the US is almost ironic.
It kind of
in terms of how patriotic
it kind of is.
But like with Canada, it's like, yeah, you can make fun of us for like whatever, it's fine. In Australia, you can make fun of us for whatever, it's fine. Because they just laugh and then they make fun of New Zealand and it's all fun and games. But that's what we get for being isolationist warmongers. Also, I've decided I'm going to stop impersonating the Australians and doing the generic like. Because first of all, like I'm bad at it. Second of all,
I always thought that an Australian was right here in the room with us every time you did it.
Yeah. So I mean, I always say the generic things like shrimp on the Barbie and stuff. Like it's so pedestrian. It's like being like, oh, I'm from Canada. Like, okay, very original.
Are you saying you're going to up your game, or you're going to like wait? Are you taking a break and then you're going to come back with a new and improved Australian accent? Is that what you're telling me?
That'd be great. But what I came to this revelation. The only reason I did that in the first place was because I know the hosts of Game Life Balance Australia listen. And I think that I was subtly trying to get them to impersonate Americans back, because my favorite thing on Game Life Balance Australia is when they impersonate Americans. I love when they impersonate Americans. Rob did a bit like 12 episodes ago and I lost my mind. It was the best. So I'm just going to not do this passive aggressive thing. I'm just going to say, Rob and AC, please, for the love, impersonate Americans, because it's great. Did you ever listen to my college radio show and hear the Drake Diversity Minute?
I definitely listened to the show, but I don't remember that.
All right, this is the last thing I'll say, and then we'll go. But this is how far our country and society has come. I used to literally do a segment where I would put something from the Drake newspaper into the Drake University newspaper into Google Translate online, and if I translated it into Spanish, I would play the Mexican hat dance and read it. If it was Italian, I would play like that generic, some generic Italian, like, like accordion kind of music.
Sure.
And read it in Italian. It's like, that's not a thing you can do in 2018.
That's really cringy. It's really,
really not okay. And like, I had friends of other cultures who loved it. They thought it was funny. So I don't think in Des Moines, Iowa, 85% white, that I was particularly offending many people. But let's just say I realize now it was problematic that 18-year-old me did this.
Yeah.
So I will not do that. But that said, it is hilarious when Australians, or really anyone, impersonate Americans. So that should happen more. I'll let you take it.
Except for Americans.
Yeah, I'll let you
Americans
take it
should not be impersonating
or talking
other Americans or talking. Right. Thank you for listening to the Game Life Balance US podcast, the American edition of the Game Life Balance podcast. If you had fun, then please tell one friend about our podcast. No more. We don't need that kind of publicity, and that's all we ask. You can learn more about Game Life Balance, including our sister show in Australia, at gamelifebalance.us, or check out Game Life Balance and lots of other geeky shows on the Gonna Geek Network at gonnageek.com.
You were recording this whole time, right?
My voice hurts. I'm done. Yeah, no, I was recording. Oh man, it's 6 hours and 35 minutes. That is a long time.
How long is that in Australian time?
It's opposite. It's like upside down.